All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the Zephyr rework. Obviously, I know that the Railjack 3.0 stuff is out, and we will be talking about that in the next video I put up on the channel. But today, I wanted to talk about the Zephyr rework because, spoiler, it's very good, and I've spent a good amount of time with it. So, with that, let's get into it. We are going to be showing off multiple builds today, both a Helminth build and a non-Helminth build that is a little bit of a meme, but is still quite effective. So, first and foremost, we're going to talk about our meme build, which is Ground Pound. So, this is a build that is focused on Tailwind. Yes, that's right, using Tailwind, and not just for travel, which is the surprising part. So, with target fixation, each enemy hit increases Tailwind damage by 100%, and damage only resets upon being on the ground for 2 seconds. What this means is that you can get to some really, really high, really, really stupid numbers with target fixation just by slamming your face into the ground over and over and over. And this also makes it so that your dash gives you this damage bonus as well. So if there's a huge line of enemies, you can build up this percentage very, very quickly. All that coming together, being said, basically, the changes to the damage of Tailwind, where the dive bomb is much more effective now, means that we can go with a quite negative strength and still get a lot out of it. Basically, slam your face into the ground and use your 3 to survive. It's really the whole of it. Things to note about this build is that it's actually quite good at running Elite Sanctuary Onslaught, because you can dive into like Arctic Xmas bubbles and stuff and kill everybody, and it can scale between waves because you can, as long as you're in the air, whenever you go through the portal, you keep your percentage. So you can kind of just go into ESO and then just have instant kills for the entirety of it in your pretty respectable 20-meter AoE. There are a couple of issues with this that is kind of the issue with Tailwind and why this is not more of what I would call a major build, but we're going to show off real quick just how this works. Basically, you put enemies together, you slam them, and every enemy you hit gives you 100% damage. So on the top right there, you can see my damage increasing by quite a considerable amount until we have only the heavy units remaining. And the armored heavy units are, of course, going to give us a little bit of trouble, but this is also crowd control, so it will kill them pretty readily as well. So we're at 8,300% damage, and because of the new functionality of Zephyr's 1, we can very easily just hover about and look for new enemies to slam into, fly around with R1 because it's just quite cheap, and use R2 to group enemies in order to slam into them. Obviously, you saw the effectiveness of the new 2. It's not quite as good, I would say, as what was shown off in Pablo's preview of Zephyr. It seems to have been nerfed slightly from that state, but the dive bombing works, and it's clearly a much better pull than it has been in the past. So this works quite well. Issues with this build are, 1, if you need to interact with terminals or anything, you're probably going to be on the ground for more than 2 seconds, which is going to reset your buff. So in missions where you're going to need to interact with many terminals and don't have teammates that can do that and stuff for you, you're going to lose your scaling at those points in the mission. In addition to that, if you also, as a note for anyone who's wondering, you cannot go into Operator and remain hovering. You do drop out of the air, unlike what you get from Titania, where Titania will still hover while you're in Operator mode, so you can't use your Operator to hack or anything tricky like that, as nice as that would be. And then other stuff. You would also have a problem with your 1. So, from this test, obviously, it looks really, really good to be hitting all those enemies and be getting that huge multiplier really, really fast. But the bad thing about Tailwind is that this AoE is not a bubble. This AoE is more of a half sphere. So whenever you slam in, it is line of sight only, and it goes above you, kind of. It doesn't go super far above you, but it kind of gives you a small AoE upwards. You're going to hit like Osprey and stuff that are flying around, and like maybe up some stairs you're going to get some hits. But the hit detection, whenever the ground is very uneven, can be really, really rough because of that line of sight restriction. So you're going to have trouble in any really coagulated type of tile set, and things of that nature. So just keep that in mind, that while this looks really, really strong in the simulacrum, it is a little bit weaker in practice because of a lot of the tighter tile sets that we are dealing with in many cases. Now, those things are what kind of make that a meme build. So let's talk about the definitely not a meme at all build, which is Tornado Breach. This build looks extremely similar. It's literally one mod different, where you use natural talent instead of the augment. Using natural talent instead of the augment is basically just so that you have less downtime on your turbulence, so that you don't die while you're mid-cast of turbulence, or at least you do that much less often. Also, being able to cast all your other abilities faster, and of course, Breach Surge is a relatively slow cast that you can improve with this, is nice just for being able to get your tornadoes down super fast, get a Breach Surge out there, etc., etc. So I like natural talent in this build, but I will say it's a little bit of a taste thing. Now, this build is going to be the one that I'm using in the 20-minute or so survival at the end of this video. I did pre-record that. That was my first run, just kind of testing out the build, and I think it shows off the power of this build quite well, as that is in Steel Path, in the Kuva survival, and, you know, just kind of doing that whole thing. And there are really no troubles whatsoever that I ran into in terms of this build dealing damage. It is extremely high damage output, but you will see me in that video die a couple of times due to... well, one of them, I don't know why I died, because I was casting and I should have had my shield gate at that point. But for the most part, I died just due to mistakes on my part, and just because of Zephyr sometimes getting unlucky with how Turbulence works. Because while Turbulence is really good most of the time and is better because of shield gating, sometimes you're going to get unlucky kind of regardless, which is a bit unfortunate, but expected. So... with that, let's show off what this can do. Obviously, you're going to see it a lot in the survival at the end of the video, but I just want to go over why this works so well. We can turn off invincibility here. You put on your 3, you throw your tornadoes down, you use your 2 to get the enemies into the tornado, you can use your 1 in order to put Breach Surge on all the enemies, and then a weapon like the Fulman can fire through the tornadoes and multi-hit every enemy in the tornado. That will also proc Breach Surge on all of the enemies that are in this, with not only the hits from the tornadoes, but also the multi-hits from a weapon like the Fulman or the Arcoplasma or what have you. And that basically makes it so that nothing will survive these tornadoes. The new functionality of the tornadoes to, if you hold the ability, being able to just put the tornadoes wherever you want in this little triangle formation, means that the enemies are kind of in all the tornadoes at once. So firing through them and getting even sometimes like the triple tornado, like multi-hit on every enemy that's in the tornadoes is extremely, extremely powerful. So I haven't got to the end of the scaling of this yet. The 20-minute survival in the Steel Path Kuva Fortress is the longest thing that I've done with this. So I don't know where like the end of the road is in terms of scaling, but you're probably pretty easily going to be able to go an hour in Steel Path without seeing the end of where this scales to. So I'm going to say it's pretty good. Obviously, that will require a little more testing on my part. But yeah, this is extremely powerful. Now let's talk about how to break it wide open, because this build is really accessible. I would say that this build in general, hyper accessible. You don't need to have an Excella slot for this. You can very easily lose the 15% ability range. You can have a rank 8 Prime Continuity. You can have a rank 8 Narrow-Minded. That will drastically decrease the endo costs on this. You don't need Arcane Energize. You don't need Arcane Pistolier, which is kind of not doing anything in this build right now. Anyways, it might as well be an empty slot. That makes this build very, very cheap. Obviously, you can also make this one less Forma than the only one Forma that it is already by just removing natural talent. So you can do this on an extremely, extremely small budget with barely any resources going into it, which is great. However, if you want to make this way more survivable, you can really amp up what you're putting into this build by a lot. Now, what I'm about to show is not maybe my advice, but it will make it extremely hard to kill you. So, if you switch out Fleeting Expertise for Prime Flow, that changes the cost of your abilities to 50 or more for every single one of your abilities. That is Very, very important. We also get a lot more duration, so you're going to have to cast your tornado much less often, which, depending on your setup, can matter. A bunch of stuff goes into this. If you switch out Prime Flow, because of this increase in duration, that means you can drop Narrow-Minded and put Overextended in this slot. And then we can put Augur Message in this slot. What that does is that gives us 80% energy spent on abilities is converted to shields. So this is important because at this point, we can include Brief Respite instead of Corrosive Projection because our damage scales very, very fast, and we just do tons of damage anyway and don't need very much strength in order to get that damage. We can use Brief Respite instead of Corrosive Projection to get another 150% of energy spent on abilities to shields. So what that does is that means that on any ability cast, we are getting at least 2.3 times our energy in. So because we have 450 shields, if we use a Dragon Key to reduce our shields down to 25% of their usual total, any ability we press is going to remax out our shields. So basically, we can restore our shield gate at will on any ability press. Turns out, that is really, really good for survival in high levels because it gives us a certain amount of just raw invincibility as long as our energy economy can handle it. And between Zeneric and Energize, which I would highly, highly advise you have if you are going to go for this build, means that we basically are completely invincible at all times. Now, the downsides to this are that because Zephyr has too many shields, yes, that's right, more shields is a downside here, we cannot run efficiency to do this, so we can't swap out natural talent and throw in like a streamline, because otherwise we're not going to restore our shield gate whenever we cast our abilities. So it would actually be really beneficial if we had like an arcane that reduced our shields significantly as well to get us down into like the 50 shield range. That would be kind of perfect, but we don't have that. So if you're willing to go 100% efficiency, that is absolutely a thing that you can do in order to get a bunch of shields. Also, on top of that, if you really wanted to and you don't think you need natural talent, you can go Blind Rage instead of Intensify to lower your efficiency more, and then in the natural talent slot put Streamline to get a negative, and then you don't need to run Augur Message, so you can run Augur Strength. And if you go that way, it's going to make it so that Breach Surge has a really, really high damage multiplier on it, and it will do even more unnecessary amounts of damage. These are all things that are possible that, honestly, I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do. But feel free to try out those variants on this build. I think they're all quite viable, and depending on what your goals are, they're going to be good for different things. In general, I think the budget version of this is going to be great for like 99% of content, and you're not going to need to go the whole Dragon Key reducing your shields route. But if you want that extra potential survivability and you have the budget for an Arcane Energize or whatever else you want in this build, go for it. But yeah, that is new Zephyr stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoy the Kuba survival that is at the end of this video. And I will see you tomorrow for Railjack thoughts and things. So goodbye, everybody. See you then. Goodbye. Enjoy the survival.